I kind of needed to process that for a little bit before I could talk about it. Okay, I'm ready. Joker is the very grounded, realistic, gritty origin of the Joker. It stars Joaquin Phoenix and is directed by The Hangover's Todd Phillips. We follow Phoenix as Arthur Fleck in 1981 New York-esque Gotham City through the events that lead him on his journey to becoming the Joker. This is not the Joker that many of you know. This is an all-new version for just this movie. And while he does share some similarities with the character that we all know and love, there are some new things here that keep the story fresh. There's been a lot of hype leading up to this movie. And honestly, that kind of worried me because everybody's been talking about how great it was and how you gotta see it and it's the best movie of the year. I know you're wondering, why would that worry you? Well, what worried me was that I was going to go in and because of all the hype, I'd be let down. But I'm here to tell you that that is not the case in the slightest. This movie was fantastic. Now don't get me wrong, it is not what you're expecting. And it is absolutely unlike any other comic book movie you've ever seen. That's actually one of the things I really liked about it. It didn't seem like a comic book movie. Lots of people have compared it to a Martin Scorsese movie, and yes, there are similarities there. But at the same time, the movie is very much its own thing. And like I said, what it is absolutely not is like any other comic book movie you've ever seen. It's ultimately just about a guy struggling with mental illness and just trying to make it in the world. But unfortunately, like some, the world just won't let him make it. So, he takes matters into his own hands. Now that seems pretty clear cut, but this movie is anything but that. Another one of the myriad of things that I really enjoyed about this movie is the way that it handles its characters. There's never that one thing, that defining moment that changes everything and he just all of a sudden becomes this character. It's much more a natural progression of things. You spend the vast majority of this movie watching this guy get the shit beat out of him mentally and physically, and seeing how these instances throughout his life shape his life moving forward. The movie's also really uncomfortable. Like from the get-go, the way it's shot, everything about it makes you just feel kind of uncomfortable the whole time, which is intentional and matches the feel of Phoenix's character in the movie and how he feels throughout life every day. And you definitely feel it here. They did a fantastic job with the tone of this movie. As mentioned before, the story takes place in 1981, and it really looks like 1981. And that goes beyond everything that's on screen. That all looks great, and it looks like 1981, like I said. But just the look of the film overall, the way it's shot, the movie looks like it could have come out in the late 70s or early 80s. They did a fantastic job of transporting you back to that time period. The performances here are great as well, and we'll get to those in a minute, but real quick, I want to touch on the story. It is fantastic, engrossing, interesting from beginning to end. However, I really can't talk much about it without spoiling anything. And that's why I'm not going to mention specifics about the story much, because this is something I just do not want to ruin for anyone. It needs to be experienced for yourself. This is going to be tough, but I can do it! All that being said, what I will say about the story is that this is the most grounded and realistic take on a comic book character that I have ever seen in my life. For lack of a better word, it feels like a real movie and not a comic book movie. Nothing wrong with comic book movies, but I think you know what I mean when I say that. On top of all the hype, going in I was also a bit worried about them explaining the Joker's origins. One of the biggest draws of the Joker over the years was the vagueness and multiple choice of his background. It's never been set in stone, and that mystique has always been one of the big draws of the character. So I was a little worried when they went to do an origin movie about the character and was afraid that it would take something away from it. And while I can't talk about it without spoiling anything, I will say that after coming out of it, I'm extremely happy with how they dealt with that. And while they do shed some light on the character, they're at the same time able to maintain that mystique about the character as well. And I'm really interested to see what other people think about the way that they dealt with this. I, for one, thought it was great, but I can see how it could end up being pretty divisive. Regardless, I think people will be talking about it for a long time. Something else people will be talking about for a long time is the absolutely fantastic performances in this movie. Everyone does a wonderful job here. But, of course, as we have all heard, and we all know by this point, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker portrayal here is absolutely mesmerizing. He is a severely ill, broken man. And through the subtle nuances and pure skill that Phoenix has on display here, he's able to elicit sympathy and disgust at the same time from the viewer. And while many times throughout the film you feel very sympathetic for the character, at the same time he's very distant. He's almost like Gollum in Lord of the Rings. He's a broken being teetering on the edge, and you want him to come back from the darkness and be good, but you just slowly see him slide down the hill into destruction. In some other actors' hands, this could have just been a pretty good performance, but in Phoenix's more than capable, extremely talented hands, it is an award-worthy performance for the ages. Mark my words, people will be talking about this performance for years to come. Speaking of what people have been talking about, leading up to this movie, people have really been talking about the violence a lot. If you went off of what everybody else has been saying, you'd think you were walking into the most violent movie ever made. Going off all that, I was really expecting to see heads popping every 5 minutes or something. But no, it's not that at all. While there are acts of violence in this movie for sure, it is in no way anywhere near as violent as movies that have come out as early as this year. Hell, just recently, John Wick 3 is leaps and bounds more violent than this movie. But for some reason, people think that this movie is one of the most violent movies to come out in recent history. I think a lot of that boils down to the realism of the violence in the movie. It's not glamorized, it's not over the top, it's none of that. It's very sudden and real. It's not even a lot of occurrences of violence, but when it does happen, it's extremely sudden and very visceral. I also think that the fact that the majority of the movie doesn't have violence in it, and it is more of a slower burn movie, that when these sudden acts of violence do happen, they are that much more jarring. The juxtaposition of slow character moment and then blowing somebody's fucking brains out is pretty sudden and can be kind of shocking. But, like I said, it is nowhere near as violent as everybody's making it sound. So I don't think at this point it's any surprise that I really like this movie. And while it does have a lot of great aspects to it, like anything, it also has some flaws. Not many, but there's a couple. Now, I can't really get into them much without spoiling anything, but the only thing that really stuck out to me as far as flaws go takes place right there at the end of the movie. It's not the actual end of the movie, it's something that happens right there at the end, but it is something that kind of bothered. There's a thing that happens not at the very end, but real damn close to the end. Now, when this thing happens, it is fairly quick, it doesn't take up a lot of screen time, and it's not terrible or anything, but it felt a little out of place, or maybe even tacked on a little. Once again, not awful, and I guess I'm okay with it, but it did stand out, I thought. It kind of seemed like it was a bit of an afterthought, and yeah, there's something that happens right after it that might explain why it's there, but once again, spoilers, I really can't get into that. I didn't really think that the movie that they had built up to this point needed this thing to happen. Now, I understand why it was there, and honestly, the fan in me loved that it was there. But as far as in that moment in the film I was watching, it just, to me, felt a little out of place and somewhat tacked on. Not a deal breaker by any means, but it was there. Guys, this movie was amazing. Unlike a lot of movies that had this kind of hype leading up to them, it absolutely lived up to it. Honestly, for me, it surpassed it. This is definitely one of the best movies I've seen all year, and it is absolutely worth your time and money because it is 100% a unicorn. I don't give that rating to a lot of movies, but this one gets it, and it's probably one of the best movies I've seen that I've given that rating to. Go out and see this movie right now. It is absolutely fantastic. So there it is, guys, my review of Joker. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
All I have are negative thoughts.
Man, this was like a really hard review to do because I just really couldn't talk about the story because pretty much anything I say about it specifics-wise is going to spoil something. I don't usually do them, but I'm going to need to do like a spoiler review or spoiler talk or something. Yeah, I think that's going to have to happen. So I get to review a movie twice.